Static Shiv has been seeing a resurgence in popularity on Jhin. The trending Shirelius strategy for Cho'Gath is equally effective, yet overlooked on another mid lane champion, while Crit Briar has become a viable option. All this and much more in today's video as we showcase 10 of the strongest emerging builds for patch 25.6. And did you know mastering your champion will boost your win rate by a massive 9% on average? That's why at SkillCapped we offer Smurf commentaries. Simply select a champion you want to master and get guides from challenger experts teaching how to play your champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. You're even guaranteed to have all your questions answered by that very same challenger expert. After that, take one of our 5 brand new courses that teach you the secrets to carrying as a top laner, jungler, mid laner, AD carry, and support. It doesn't stop there though. We have new Season 15 courses on macro, wave control, trading, setting and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, low elo mistakes, the list goes on. The best part, you can try all this out completely risk-free. Since if you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below right now to get the rank you've always dreamed of. So over the past couple of patches, we have seen an AD build emerge on Sylas. Many players have been running a Sundered Sky Rush into Manamune, but there's an alternative build that's even better. Instead of going for Sundered Sky, what's working far better in its place is Riftmaker. So you go for the 2-item core of Riftmaker into Manamune and come online super hard in the mid game. Just have a look at these comparison clips in Practice Tool. With a full rotation of Sylas spells to where you're able to get every single passive proc off, the Rocket Belt into Cosmic Drive build is dealing 890 damage. Riftmaker into Muramana is not even close, as the passive damage is just so much higher that you end up dealing 1200 damage, literally 310 more than the standard AP build. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how does this even make sense? Manamune is an AD item, so how do you deal more damage without even auto-attacking? It all comes down to how Sylas's passive scales. Sylas's passive has a whopping 130% AD ratio, so the whole idea behind the setup is for you to outlast your opponent in extended fights and spam out those passive procs. That's why Riftmaker is so good in combination with Manamune, because the passive on Riftmaker ramps up the longer fights last. The mana that you get from Manamune is also incredibly valuable on Sylas because he's a champion who can run out of mana quite quickly if he does not opt for a mana item. That's one of the downsides to the standard Sylas builds, as his Riftmaker into Cosmic Drive core has no mana at all. For your 3rd item in this build, it's either Spirit Visage or Frozen Heart depending on the enemy comp. Frozen Heart into majority physical damage and Spirit Visage into majority magic. For the rune page, you can take Grasp or Conquer depending on the matchup. Grasp is great into most other fighters, while Conquer is best into tanks or ranged tops. Now that tank builds are no longer viable on Jace, there's a new setup that has been gaining in popularity recently, and it consists of a Spear of Shojin Rush. The build has been viable on Jace for a while now, but it wasn't until this patch to where more players started picking it up. The item works really well on Jace because it gives him all the core stats that he wants. 25 ability haste on basic abilities is amazing, and the passive to where you gain ramping damage by hitting opponents makes the extended fight strength of the build really good. After going for Spear of Shojin, it's Manamune 2nd and Black Cleaver 3rd. So more of a pure bruiser setup here, which is not something we've traditionally seen very much on Jace, at least until very recently. The build is currently outperforming the more offensive option though of building Eclipse and Cyrilda's Grudge. It definitely makes sense because with this bruiser build on Jace, you have more margin for error and you can actually play him up in his melee form more comfortably in fights without having to worry about getting one shot. For the Keystone rune with this build, you will be taking Grasp with Demolish, Bone Plating, and Overgrowth, followed by Biscuits and Jack of all trades for secondaries. So with the melee buff to Yuntal Wild Arrows dropping last patch, it's actually made the item a viable pickup on a few champions. Briar is one of them, and she can look to rush Yuntal for a more bursty 1-item spike. The 2-item core is all out offensive as you build Blade of the Ruined King 2nd, and from then on out, you'll transition into more bruiser or tank items with Black Cleaver slotting in 3rd. Yuntal has some really good synergy with Briar's kit because whenever she finds a pick with her R, she's going to have such incredible burst threat due to the bonus attack speed that the Yuntal passive provides. The build is more specifically working very well in the lower elos on Briar, and this makes sense because you do need time in order to receive the maximum power from Yuntal. The crit that you receive from the item stacks up over time, giving you 0.4% for every auto attack. So for the lower ranks to where the early game is not as important, you can get away with the scaling aspect of the item a little more. For the rune setup on Briar, you're going to take Press the Attack with Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace, followed by Sudden Impact and Treasure Hunter for secondaries. So we all know how insane Darius Jungle has been with his Ghostblade into Deadman's Plate build, but there's actually another jungler who you can run this exact same build on who's very underrated. Rek'Sai has been loving the Ghostblade into Deadman's core, and it's actually her highest win rate build despite not being played at a very high rate. This setup is actually the opposite of the Briar build in the sense that it performs much better in the higher elo. Ghostblade Rush on Rek'Sai in Emerald elo and above has a much higher win rate than Stridebreaker. However, in Plat and below, Stridebreaker actually does still win out. The logic behind this is that Rek'Sai is a champion who can absolutely take over games in the early to mid game, and high elo players can leverage that much better with the Ghostblade Rush and close games out very quickly when they get a lead. In the lower ranks though, closing games out early is much harder to do, and if games do end up going later, Stridebreaker in the mid to late game will be better for Rek'Sai when team fighting. The Ghostblade Rush is all about pushing your leads and finding picks constantly. The movement speed that you get from Ghostblade and Deadman's also makes you less reliant on having flash up to make plays, which is really nice. The rune setup when going for the Ghostblade Rush is going to look a little different as it's Hail of Blades you're taking instead of Conqueror. Hail of Blades will synergize nicely with Ghostblade as the quick 3 autos will have you bursting even harder. This next build is being spammed in solo queue by the Anivia legend himself, Froggen, and it's a heavy movement speed stacking core. What he's been doing is running Shirelia's as a core pickup on Anivia with Boots of Swiftness as well. It's not actually Shirelia's Rush though, as he's building a Catalyst first, sitting on that and never upgrading it to Rod, going Malignance as his first completed item, and then Shirelia's after that. This makes sense because Anivia is a champion who's more reliant on mana than someone like Cho'Gath, so she can't really get away with rushing Shirelia's as well as Cho can. Important to note is that this is a tierless Anivia build. You aren't going for Archangels or Rod of Ages at all, so it's a much quicker spiking build than we are normally used to on Anivia. All the kiting power that you have with this setup will feel great in the mid game. Anivia's main weakness is her lack of a gap closer and shorter range, so the heavy boost in movement speed helps her space so much better and alleviate that weakness. In runes, it's important that you're taking Presence of Mind. Presence of Mind providing you with the mana back on kills will help with the lower mana pool that Anivia has to work with when going for this build. There are currently many viable Yasuo builds going around, and one that actually has the highest win rate now is a Yuntal Wild Arrows Rush. With about a full patch of players running Yuntal on Yasuo and over 24,000 games played with the item, it is his highest win rate item. Of course, the reason for this rise in power is due to the buff that the item just got, where melee champs now stack up the passive crit 50% faster. So you're able to max out the crit faster now, which is huge for Yasuo, considering that every 1 point of crit that Yasuo has counts as 2. The big benefit of going for Yuntal is that it offers up much stronger all-in power than any other option. You get 35% attack speed from stats, and then another 30% when proccing its passive, so your damage per second is much higher than any other option. The only downside really is that you don't get any lifesteal, so the sustain is weaker than if you went Blade of the Ruined King. Especially in matchups though to where you won't be getting poked very much, then going for Wild Arrows is going to be even better value. For Yasuo's rune page, you're going to take Lethal Tempo with Absorb Life, Alacrity, and Last Stand, followed by Second Wind and Overgrowth for secondaries. An item that we have been seeing rise back up in popularity on Jhin over the past few patches is Static Shiv. Shiv has actually had the highest win rate for any rush item on Jhin over the past patch, so it's performing very well, but not being played nearly as much as the Collector. Raw damage output is going to be higher with the Collector, but there are many non-damage factors that make up for that on Shiv. You get the 4% movement speed along with the Electro Spark passive that helps with wave clear and gives your first 3 autos some added burst. The cost of Shiv is also 300 gold less than the Collector, so those factors are leading to it outperforming. Most players that build Shiv on Jhin actually opt for the wrong second item, as you don't want Rapid Fire Cannon and instead should be going for Infinity Edge. If you build Shiv in a Fire Cannon, then you're kind of just a pea shooter, so picking up IE second is key here. Rune page for Jhin consists of Fleet Footwork with Presence of Mind, Bloodline, and Cutdown, while Celerity and Gathering Storm are the best secondaries. We're seeing this Xayah build starting to be prioritized way more in the higher elos lately, and it revolves around the Wild Arrows Rush. Wild Arrows is turning out to be a really strong rush item on many ADCs, but for some champs like Xayah, players have yet to catch on. In Challenger Elo games, Wild Arrows has a 30% play rate on Xayah, but in Gold, it's way down at 10%. The crazy thing though is that in the lower ranks, Wild Arrows actually performs even better because it is an item that you don't get its entire power budget from the moment you pick it up. You need to scale up a bit for Wild Arrows to be most effective due to its stacking crit passive. So in the lower elos where games last much longer on average, it's an especially powerful pickup. 2-item spike is where you really come online, as the core of Wild Arrows and Infinity Edge will outdamage everything else. For the rune page, you will be taking Lethal Tempo with Presence of Mind, Bloodline, and Cutdown, followed by Free Boots and Biscuits for secondaries. Being a Bard main is so fun because he has so many different builds that pop up for him throughout the season. Right now, what we have been seeing emerge as the optimal meta build is a more damage-oriented core. You still rush the Deadman's Plate, nothing changes there, but for the second item, it's going to be Liandry's. So with Bloodsong, the passive from Deadman's, and the added damage from Liandry's, your autos actually hit really hard with this setup. If you're ahead of the curve and are running this build on Bard, then you can easily chunk squishies for more than half of their health with a few autos. It's just the perfect solo queue build for Bard because it gives him a nice mix of tankiness and damage so that he can solo carry harder and not have to rely as much on his team. And of course, with Electrocute coming back into meta on Bard, the damage output is even crazier now. The full rune page consists of Electrocute with Cheap Shot, Deep Ward, and Relentless Hunter, followed by Celerity and Scorch for secondaries. Neeko's support has been quite underrated for a while now, and there's a new build that's providing her with even more power. Most players are running a super offensive offensive core on Nico, building Zanya's, and then taking Realm Spike for their item upgrade. What's working way better though is going for a more durable build, where you pick up Celestial Opposition as the item upgrade, and take Frozen Heart as a core item. Celestial Opposition is really good value on Nico because she wants to be in the middle of fights, hitting those multi-man Rs, and she's bound to be taking damage, so being able to tank a lot more with Celestial is amazing. Frozen Heart has so much value on Nico if you're playing into a heavier physical damage comp. The item is quite cheap at only 2,500 gold, provides 75 armor and 20 ability haste, while its passive is very easy for Nico to proc on multiple enemies. Passive on Frozen Heart reduces the attack speed of nearby enemies by 20%, and when Nico's in the middle of a team fight, hitting those multi-man Rs, she'll be able to reduce the attack speed of multiple enemies. Just the pure tankiness of this build will turn you into much more of a disruptor in fights, as enemies will have to waste way more damage to actually kill you, so that your teammates following up aren't the main focus. For Nico's rune page, you will be taking Comet with Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, and Scorch, followed by Sudden Impact and Relentless Hunter for secondaries. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it everyone, those are 10 new builds that are pretty underrated but very powerful for patch 25.6. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.